Don't really have a ton of announcements to go through. Richard didn't have anything to mention other than that Josh and Kirby got home safely, which was good to hear. That's a long flight back home to California, so we're definitely we're glad to have them last weekend, and excited for the next time we get to see them. Kelly mentioned that he heard from Tom today, and that Tom said hello to everyone. So if you haven't had a chance to reach out to Tom since he moved, maybe this is a good opportunity to just reach out and say hello, shoot him a text, or give him a call. That would probably be encouraging. Blake and Liz are doing good. It seems like Oakley's doing good. He's still at the hospital. Just need to keep praying that he's going to be putting down the bottles is, I guess, the prayer right now. So I think he has to put down a certain number of bottles in a day or two period for him to be able to go home at this point. So it's kind of the last thing that they're waiting for. But healthy otherwise and is doing really well. Some of the pictures I've seen, he looks very healthy. So looks like he's doing good. So anything else that we could be mentioning? Yeah.
The next class segment starts next Thursday.
Okay.
And the material for that is in the box.
Perfect. Okay, so next class segment is on the table here. If you want to come grab that, I think we're doing church foundations. Is that right? Okay, cool. So look forward to that. And I guess y'all will probably be emailing out as well, or just printed. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Plenty of copies.
Okay. Pick up a printed copy if you can. All right. Let's sing number 6. We're just going to sing one verse of this song, and then we'll dive into the class for tonight. The Lord is my light, number 6. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? And he is my strength, the defense of my life. Whom shall I fear? Have mercy, O Lord, and answer my cry. Turn not away, for you are my help, the God of salvation. Turn not away. Wait, wait, oh wait on the Lord. Be strong and take courage. Wait on the Lord. Wait, wait, oh wait on the Lord. Be strong and take courage. Yes, wait on the Lord. All right, I'll say a word of prayer and then we'll dive into the class for tonight. God, thank you for today. Thank you for this week that you've given us. Thank you for all the blessings of it. And thank you also for the challenges. Father, we pray that in all things that you walk us through in this life, that we will give you praise, that we'll give you glory, that we'll seek to know more about you. Be with us in our hour of study tonight. Pray that it will be fruitful and beneficial, and that above all, that you will be glorified and that we will come to know you better through it. I pray this all in Jesus' holy name. Amen.
Okay, so I am your third string quarterback. Apparently this was Tom's class, and then Blake was filling in for Tom, and now Blake is not here, so you get what you pay for, friends. We'll see how it goes. So we're going to talk about Paul tonight. I was very excited about this because I was thinking, like, oh, that's great. We're talking about lesser-known characters of the Bible, like Paul. So you'll notice your text. Hopefully you all read half of the New Testament this week. To get you ready for the class, because it's pretty much where we're at. And so we're going to go through this 3 questions. Does anybody need the questions for tonight? I mean, they'll be on the screen too if anybody wants to write it down. Or everybody did their lesson? Okay, good. So I'm expecting you guys to do a lot of talking. So we're going to we're going to go through those 3 questions, and then we're just going to talk about just lessons that we've learned from the life of Paul. So just things that you guys can think of, and I've got a list of about 20 of them, so I think knowing you guys, we'll have plenty to talk about tonight. We won't run out, so we'll kind of handle it like that. So let's just start with, kind of first of all, like what do we know about Paul? Just think like birth and heritage type stuff, nationality. What do we know about Paul? Greg?
I know he was a Jewish scholar.
Yep.
He was a Roman citizen, but he had a pedigree that was impeccable.
Yep. What else?
Benjaminite.
Okay.
Like
Yep.
Jeremiah.
Yep. Benjamin Knight. Wait, Austin?
Yeah, and so although he was a Pharisee, that he was called to teach to the Gentiles
Mhm.
at some point.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting side of that too. Yeah, we might get into that a little bit tonight. What else? What other citizenship did he have? Not the heavenly one. We'll get into that whole thing. But what other citizenship did he mention at some point? Yeah, he's a Roman citizen too, and that was kind of important in a couple of the stories in his life in Acts 16, Acts 22. Yeah, he's from a Jewish family from the city of Tarsus, just kind of a trade city on the Mediterranean. Kind of as already mentioned, I mean, he refers to himself as well as like a Hebrew of Hebrews. So I mean, he was a Pharisee, but he was a Hebrew of Hebrews. He mentions too, I was a devout Jew, circumcised on the 8th day, a member of the people of Israel, as Kelly pointed out, the tribe of Benjamin. But he was trained as a Pharisee. And what was a Pharisee? We don't have to go into too much detail, but what was a Pharisee?
A legal judge or
Okay. Okay. Yeah, legal judge or scholar. What else?
interpreter of the law.
Yep, interpreters of the law.
I think the Pharisees generally believed in resurrection and the existence of angels as websites. So, at least in belief and like that kind of stuff, we would maybe identify more of the Pharisees themselves.
Yeah. I always remember that because I remember the teacher always saying they were sad because they didn't believe in the resurrection. So they were sad, you see. You're welcome, that's free. Yeah, so I mean, they were all of those things, and like Austin mentioned too, it is interesting because of his mission. It didn't have a whole lot to do with the Jews. It may have had some to do with the Jews as well, but not his specific one. Who did he study under? Yeah, so a fairly well-known Pharisaic teacher, and so a pretty. Again, when he says I was a Hebrew of Hebrews, he was. I mean, you can't get much better than Paul when it comes to his training and his teaching. So what about his occupation? Okay, as a tent maker.
He also said that he was exceeding far above his peers as he was a young man coming up.
Yeah.
Full and well is believed, expected to sit on these things.
Yeah. You would think that's where he was headed, or should have ended up. So it's probably shocking to his parents with his career change. Yeah, so he's a tent maker. Who did he do a little tent making with? A couple of folks, nice couple. Yeah, Quill and Priscilla. At least from what we read. And then what about what else do we know about him? How did he respond to the church initially? Big fan, big supporter. Yeah. Yeah, he was. Yeah. Yeah, he was out to persecute. What do we know about maybe an instance or two of where he had done that? Or
Well, he was friends in that Steve
yeah, he was the coat guy.
He watched the coats.
Yeah. Okay. And then even after that, what does it say in Acts 8-ish, somewhere around there? Remember what it said?
Like went to Damascus with expedition papers.
Yeah.
and sent people back.
Yeah, that's where he was headed after that. But even I think in Acts 8, it talks about how like he just went throughout the region. That was his job. He was just a reign of terror.
Door to door.
Yep. Yeah, and so starting with Stephen, then just throughout the region, then on the way to Damascus, and then he was transformed. And we will talk about that as some of the lessons learned. I think when we get a little bit later on, past his background kind of stuff. But anybody want to just give us a quick little high level what happened on his little trip to Damascus when he was taking papers to go kill some folks or have them put in jail, probably killed? What happened on that road? Okay, he became blind.
It's scaled on the God.
That sounds horrible, but yeah.
Could not see.
I want to see a drawing of that one next time, Nate. Just as a little update, maybe. A little scaly eyes.
Yeah, he saw a light and heard the voice of the Lord, and saw the Lord in heaven. He was the only apostle to see
Yeah.
the Lord.
Yep.
He was on Damascus, and Ananias was called to go and tell him words that he might hear
Yep.
to be saved. And Ananias went to talk to him.
After a few days, and yeah.
3 days of blindness.
Yep.
Prayer.
And fasting.
Ananias told him to get up and go get baptized.
Yep.
And so he went and got baptized, and then started eating and drinking.
Yep.
And fasted for 3 days, got baptized, and then started
Yep.
earthly gifts.
Excellent. Anything else about that story anybody wants to point out? When did his name change? Or Greg, you got a comment too?
I was just gonna say, I find it a little humorous when Ananias is told to go and baptize Paul.
Yeah.
And he says,
Yeah.
"Are you sure, God?"
Yeah. That's a setup,
You know
man.
who he is?
Yeah.
He's telling God.
Yeah. And God's like, yeah, I do. Yeah. I know this guy.
And that's when he said, yes, I know who he is, and he is my chosen vessel to go to the
Yeah.
Gentiles.
Yeah. That's going to be one of the big points I think we pull out of this is some of the application stuff when we get towards the end. What was an apostle, just quickly, because some people, I mean, he wasn't one of those 12 guys, right? He wasn't even one of the 13 guys, right? I mean, after Judas killed himself and Matthias was chosen, what were maybe a couple of qualifications for an apostle, seems like?
Had to be there with
Okay, had to have at least been an eyewitness to Christ. I think that's part of it, and apparently, and we can get into any kind of speculation. I mean, it doesn't say, so we probably won't. But like Kelly said, he did see Christ. We know that he saw Christ for sure, even after Christ had gone back to heaven.
But
So,
when they were appointed Matthias, they did say someone who had walked with us from the beginning.
Yep.
And walked with him and then saw him after
Yep.
his resurrection.
and Paul had probably been walking with him, probably a little behind him with
We don't know.
with a sword. Yeah, no,
I often wonder if he knew about and saw all that Jesus was doing.
Oh, yeah.
When he talks about his covetousness.
Yeah.
If that might not be related.
Yeah.
Speculation altogether.
Yep. No, that's a good one at least. Yeah, we know that apostle was directly called by Christ too, because even with Matthias, they were casting lots, and that was still an opportunity for Jesus to make that decision for them when they were doing that. So one that was called by Christ, one that was an eyewitness of the resurrected Christ, I think would be a good way to look at it as well. And then Paul later confirms it. I'm just going to give you 4 passages if you care to note them down or not. Romans 1:1, and then also Romans 1:5. Galatians 1:1 and 2, and then 1 Timothy 2:7, where he just refers to himself as an apostle as well. Paul liked to travel, took a few little journeys. We won't go into all those because I get confused of what he did on which one, but he took 3 of them at least, maybe a 4th one on his way to Rome. So he had those journeys. We always learn about those as kids. He was eventually arrested. We know that there were a lot of bad things that happened in Paul's life. That's something that we're going to talk about in just a minute or so anyway, all the things that he went through. Michael?
Yeah, what did, cause Paul said he could teach sinners.
Mhm.
So what quality, what quality did God son Paul? And what the quality he had to be a chosen vessel?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I don't know that I know it. I mean, I think, again, we can kind of speculate on what those were, but you can see, I mean, just, it's interesting. Someone even mentioned earlier, he was zealous. I mean, whatever he did, he put his whole heart into. But it's got to be like with David. We always David was a man after God's own heart, but look at the fool. Look at all the things that he did. He did all these horrible things, but there's something that God saw in him. Just like with Paul. I mean, and that, again, that's kind of get to one of our applications, some of the lessons learned, but like, what would you see? What would you have seen? And we won't, like I said, we'll kind of hit on that in a little bit.
And just as an example, because Paul, we have so much of his writings, and he does so much admonition in the early days of the church, where people are not only
Yep.
But selecting someone like him to be an example in those early kind of conflict-filled days of the early church
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's I think that's kind of just it's a great time for that transition into the second question. But because of the example of Paul, and because of what he had done, and because of his guilt, and all of these things that even I mentioned a little bit in greater depth in the lesson itself, he leaves us this example and explains his mindset a little bit. Because again, it's like I am the chief. Like kind of to Abby's point, he's like, if you think you've got a rough time, I'm your chief. Like think about the things I did. I actually was killing Christ followers. Like it's not that I just kind of rejected Christ a little bit. I was going and actively pursuing these people and killing them. I feel kind of guilty about that. Greg and then Michael.
I was going to add to that great point, and also as people are trying to bring Judaism into Christianity, he's kind of the perfect person to say, well, I know all about Judaism. I
Yeah.
know all about the old law, and I know its works.
Yeah.
So he kind of is able to just want to follow the Judaism.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. It's something we didn't point out about the Pharisees. They held to the oral tradition just as much as the written. So like the written was very important, of course, to choose, but the Pharisees took it that step above. Like here's also some oral tradition. It's not really part of the law. Here's some tradition that we're good with, and so they also did that. Michael, and then I think Kelly, you had a comment.
Well, I just, it just shows how, even for somebody to kill something like my family, I couldn't forget it right away. And, it was so easy to say, well, you kill all these people. And, some of the people, how did you change it?
Yeah.
But it shows you that you can change it, how the condition.
And how heinous that crime is. Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's one thing. I forget sometimes, but like, who put Jesus on the cross? Pharisees. It's like Paul. I mean, it's like his people put Jesus in. So I always think, well, Paul persecuted Christians. Right? He probably was standing there cheering when Jesus was on the cross. Hey, yeah, I don't know. It's speculation. Kelly,
Yeah, to the point of, it was Paul and that was the chosen vessel. He was a scholar in the law. And when he talks to Jews and the Gentiles in the synagogue, he reasons from the scripture with them. So to reason from the scripture, he had that background to do that.
Yeah.
And he also had a lot of background. He mentions others from the Gentile line.
Yeah.
So he had a great deal of scholarship. He presented the gospel both to the Jews and the Gentiles. And that's also a point of encouragement for me, because if he reasoned with them from the scriptures, then that would be
absolutely. Yeah, I think that point too. Abby, I think that point too, just about like I like how you mentioned even with the Greeks and their own scholars and stuff. It's like the literacy rate was maybe 10, 15%, whatever. It's not real high. Paul was very well educated. Like I think was mentioned earlier, like at a high level. Like not just like, yeah, he's a normal Pharisee. He's a pretty sharp dude. From cultural standpoint, like people he was around, I think that's an important point to make too as well. Abby and then Oscar.
Yeah, just adding to that's a really good point that someone like Paul, because where Christ's message started was among fishermen, among the common people, and then you're having this explosion of growth, and so people are hearing about Christ through all sorts of socioeconomic classes, and in a highly hierarchical world, having somebody that could garner the respect of people in power, of people in the intellectual circles, that as Christianity became most there, and its ability to spread just gets so much bigger, it just explodes. You see that in the growth of the church most of the 20th century. So seeing Paul as like that bridge from the beginnings of Christianity to then when it ended up becoming. I've never thought about that.
That's
That was a
cool.
really good point.
Yeah, I like that. Yep, Oscar.
Yeah, so in terms of what Michael and Kelly were saying, it is encouraging that God, he uses people that we things in a different perspective than he was.
No, absolutely. I mean, and praise him for that, because
Yeah.
if not, we wouldn't be sitting here, right? I mean, most of us probably wouldn't be in that. And that's part of, like, you know, what we're looking at here with this second question is like, that does give me hope. Just again, thinking about like, I'm a sinner, just like Paul. I mean, I haven't killed anybody, but I've probably done other sins that, in God's eyes, again, just as bad. So, what does God see in me that He still keeps giving me all these chances and these opportunities to be with people like you and be encouraged? And I don't deserve that. You know, like,
One person I found out, I guess about 2 years ago, I was read, I think, like, that he told us, which was him. Well, getting back to some American, piggyback what Caleb said, I just heard about, Winston doing a sermon about Paul.
Mhm.
And that's what exactly he said, Paul, so this is the midnight, but I never heard that,
hey, from two good sources, from Kelly and somebody else. I trust Kelly over anybody else. So. What other? Just thinking again, just like past sins and stuff. Like, what hope does that give you? Like thinking about Paul, like and seeing Paul's life. Because I mean, you guys know me. I've probably told you a few times. I struggle with guilt a lot, just over past sins and things that I've done. Paul's the chief. I mean, if anybody, Paul should never have been teaching anybody because he's got so many sins in his past. But what does Paul say?
Well, I think it's cool that he identifies not just that he received mercy, but that he understands why he received mercy. And that was for the reason that he could go and tell so many other people about that mercy. You know? I think it's a powerful thing for us that it's not just about being grateful that God's forgiven us for our sins, but it's like, what is our response to that? Like, you know, are we sharing that grace and mercy that's been bestowed upon us?
Yeah.
If we fully appreciate that, the natural response of all of us is to go and to tell other people.
How could you not, if you really appreciate it that way? And I guess that's when I look at my own life, it's like, I'm not appreciating it like Paul did. Because it's like, that should be, instead of me just getting down on myself and thinking, well, I'm such a horrible person, it should be like, I'm so thankful for that. I've got to tell other people about this. But it's hard to do that. And the Bible tells us too, this like, even with suffering, we suffer so that we can help other people to suffer. Like, and that's not how Jason's brain works. Like, I went through this really hard thing, so now I can help you. It's like, no, I want you to know I went through this hard thing. Like, Greg, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was gonna say, Ephesians 3:20 says that this gospel is being ministered according to the gift of God's grace. It was a gift.
Yeah.
And, you know, he didn't deserve it. But he gave him through his wonderful grace. And it's the same for us. It's a gift. We have to be in Christ, to be forgiven. And to your point, we just have to make sure other people understand this wonderful gift that we have. Hopefully they'll understand.
Absolutely. Good examples. Let's look at question 3 for a second. What were some of the struggles that Paul faced after his conversion, and what can we learn from those? Tell me some of the physical stuff, at least. I mean, he's got a nice little list at some point. I think I've made note of a few of them. But what are some of just the physical things that Paul went through?
He starts off blind from the beginning. That's
That's true. I don't think I really think about that as much. But it's like, yeah, great start, Paul. You're blind. You know, good luck. Michael? Shipwreck? Yep.
When he in prison at one time.
He did go to prison a few times. Yeah. Yeah, Paul spent some time in prison. What else?
After the first place that he is in there in Damascus, he gets persecuted so much, which is kind of ironic, because he was just
Yeah.
doing persecuted for bringing persecution to Damascus. He gets persecuted so bad, he has to be let down from the city in like a basket over
Yeah.
the wall, like some like Mission Impossible kind of
Yeah.
scene from the first, and that's the first place, you know, like that's like week 1 or however long he was in Damascus of like his time.
I think Nate just made another little note. He's like, I'm seeing, you know, Paul being let down. I think Kelly and then Austin in the back of my
The idea that when he tells that story in 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians 12 or 11, he's saying, if I must boast, and he's been going on this diatribe
Yeah.
about how I'm not going to boast, but here are my boasts.
Yeah.
If I really was going to boast, I would boast in my weakness.
Yeah.
And my weakness was that I was let down from the wall in a basket
Yeah.
and ran away.
Yeah.
And he writes that before to face the kings, Felix and Agrippa, and
Yeah.
all of. So he was afraid of the king there, but he learned not to be afraid of the kings and
Yeah.
go ahead and testify before them, and probably on to Nero and Rome also.
Yeah.
But that's a vast question too. Also, where
Yep.
do you get courage?
Yep.
Paul was afraid.
Yep.
He was not.
Yep. Awesome.
So he had this thorn in the flesh that
Yeah.
he wanted to have taken away.
Yep.
But, that's something that he had to deal with constantly.
Well, and that's, I doubt we'll get time, but that was kind of one of my things too. Like, what do we learn from? We learn a lot from Paul's prayers. Like, I've taught a class on just Paul's prayers before. What about Paul's unanswered prayers? Like, so that was like, what do you learn from that? There's a lot of great lessons just from that. Michael.
Well, I was gonna say, and it's amazing, I was just thinking about, have we really studied what exactly what going into the anybody know?
Yeah. I mean, we could speculate, but I mean, there's like five to 10 different things, but.
I wonder why the reason for that.
Well, to me, I've always thought that, like, if we knew what it was, then it might, I don't know that we could make that a bigger deal, like, hey, I'm Paul. I don't know that it's, a lot of those things are just, I don't think, the important part of that. The important part of it is, like, I am one of your apostles, I am praying to you, and what's God's answer to them? My grace is sufficient. Like, it's like, it's more about the interaction versus, like, just the specific, like, did he have a weakness and he couldn't write well, or was he blinded again, or did, some pain, or whatever it might have been.
First of all, I'm glad to see everybody.
It is good to have you back.
Thank you so much. But Paul was one of my favorite authors. But it just amazes me how and people say this unbelief they say, well, people don't change. They have done something special for so long. How can they change? But it will show you alive,
Absolutely. And that is one of the points that we'll get to in a couple of minutes. I mean, to me, that's one of the greatest lessons that I learned from Paul. Ready, everyone?
Yeah, also in 2 Corinthians, when he talks about he's compared to these super apostles now.
Yeah.
Even though he's a prolific writer, he's not that great of a speaker.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's another thing you don't really think about, but Paul seems to have some challenges.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good one, too. I hadn't thought about that one. Yeah, we talked about shipwrecks and hunger and cold and sleeplessness, imprisonment, stoning, beating with rods, flogging. One of the other ones I don't think about as much either is kind of like Nate was saying, like you started with blindness, and then everybody was willing to accept him right away, right? No, he's like, I need my buddy Barnabas to take me out, because it's like nobody. So that was one of those struggles that Paul had too. Now I'm zealous for the Lord, but who's going to listen to me? And so it's like, we know the Paul that we end up with, but we forget about Paul that just he couldn't even reach anybody, because, I mean, who would listen to this guy? I mean, it's like, I'm not going to that gospel meeting. That's a trap, brother. Yeah.
And then, it's amazing it's like if you hung out, to give an example, that's, you stand, what you're drinking for.
Yeah.
Or what are your sins? And some people think that, well, not the person,
Yeah.
and they don't understand changing focuses, they all do too.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, Paul lost a lot of buddies. He hung out with stoners. So it's like, I mean, he lost a lot of they weren't drinkers, they were stoners. But so he did. He lost all those people, and they don't understand that, right? To your point, it's like, what is wrong with this guy? What is this great thing? And a lot of them would probably reject that, but hopefully he was able to influence some of them. So let's just kind of get into, so kind of forget about the questions as much. We kind of danced around this a little bit already, but what are just lessons that we learned from the life of Paul? Just give me some, and we'll start with one that I think we've talked about a number of times already, but like, the way I look at it is no one is outside the reach of God. Like, everyone has potential. Like, because again, I'm thinking, oh, good, evangelism time. Let's have a study at the library. Who do we hope shows up? Not Paul, like, or Saul, or whatever they were calling him at the time. That guy, he has no hope. Like, that's a guy that you leave on the curb, right? Like, that's not somebody you're not going to waste your time on that kind of guy. Abby?
One thing that sticks out to me because, Paul's a difficult person because he has a lot of very valuable things to say, but he's a harsher personality.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I think about that, and I think like the Jerusalem Council. If I'm thinking like I'm that kind of Paul, I'm walking in there and telling him what needs to happen, and what does he do? He's submitting. You know, he's just like, I'm coming to you, and he's submitting to other people, which I don't normally think of. Paul's not a submitter, you know, the way I normally think about him either. Oscar?
So when I think about struggling and all the struggles that he went through, and how sometimes when I struggle with things, I say, God, take it away.
Mhm.
But there's so much that came from his struggles. There was value in his struggle because of what he struggled. He was able to bring the gospel to so many people. So there was value in the things of the struggle.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and you think about who, you know, again, he was a Jew of Jews. He was the Hebrew of Hebrews. And then he went and started talking to these Gentiles. Pharisees didn't really like the Gentiles. So it's like, you know, you start thinking about, like, Paul really had to change. Like, he really had to go to a different people and really just change his perspective, I think, on pretty much everything. Yes, everything. What are the lessons we learned? Again, I'll just make another point. Sorry, Mike, I'll get to you in just a sec. Back to the, you know, no one is outside of God's reach. I mean, I think that's important for us to remember, because I do think I'm very good about just writing people off and just like, no, I remember that one time I talked to them, I said the word God, and they kind of, and I just stopped talking to them. Like, think about Paul again. Think about this person, and Jesus was like, no, you're the one for me. And none of us would have chosen Paul. Nobody would have thought that's a great candidate. So no one is outside. No one is, and the way I think about it too is no one is useless to God. Everyone has that potential to be useful to God. Even in our sins, even in the things that we're doing wrong, God still even will use those if he needs to. But everyone has potential for God. But we're very good about, I'm sure you guys aren't. I'm really good about just writing folks off. Like, it's easy to do because there's 7 billion people out there. Like, why am I wasting time with this guy? I'm glad Christ wasted time with this guy. You know, I mean, I'm not good at reading hearts, though. I think I can, but I'm not real good at it. What other things? What other lessons? Oh, sorry, Michael. Let's skip to there.
Well, I just think that, I just like some of the cases listed, not really all of them, right? H when it says all things good is good. It didn't say all good things, it says all of us. So God can use our mistakes with our past.
Yeah.
In fact, I think that really blessing God that he's born. The fact that he's born to be born.
Yeah, I go back, I use that kind of when I go back to that question number 2, where it's like I get down on like, oh, I did this, and then I'm a horrible person, I sin, and so I get down on that instead of like almost to William's point a little bit too, like, but how can I use that? Like, okay, I did do that, but how can I use that? How can I like be so thankful for God's mercy, so thankful for God's grace, and turn that around? You know, so that's for me. That's a lesson for me, just to be able to do that as well.
I think too, with Paul, we get such a cool perspective on how he like lived and acted before he came in contact with Jesus. Then you see the very stark change afterwards. I think that tells me that like when I come in contact with Jesus through Scripture, through the gospel, through seeing the lives of people around, that should inspire change. And I think too, like it should inspire us to be willing to question even like the deep-seated things. Like Paul devoted his entire life up to that moment when he saw Christ on the road to the exact opposite of what, or maybe not the exact opposite, but like a misguided way of serving God. And when it was shown him that was not the right way, he corrected it. He instantly different, but that was because he came in contact with Jesus.
Yeah.
So if we come in contact with Jesus, let's be willing to change, to correct ourselves, even when it is like something that we devote a chunk of our life to.
That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, Jesus is the change agent there. I mean, he's the one that enabled Paul to make that change. And so we've got to be willing to do that instead of just bucking against anything that's thrown in our face that's Jesus, gospel, stuff that we don't like. Kind of like Josh was talking about over the weekend. Those things that we don't like, instead of just turning our nose up at them, actually doing something about it and making a change, doing something different. I think, too, you kind of mentioned the fact, you know, we did mention he was zealous. I think Paul, you know, his vision for ministry was very clear and strategic. He had a very clear view of who God was after that incident. I mean, I think he understood who God was. I think he was a little misguided on who the Messiah might have been at first. But then once he figured that out, he was very clear and strategic about his mission and had a very high view of the sovereignty of God and really worked hard at that. And he knew what his mission was. And like I said, he would go into the Gentiles. He's like, I love the Jews. I am one of them, but here's my mission. It's a weird mission for a Pharisee, but I'm headed to the Gentiles. You guys worry about the Jews in Jerusalem here. Correct?
And he was, he had his elevator speech. He really had to say he's going to
Yeah.
preach the gospel. Just a matter of time before he came out of his mouth. And he was relentless. I mean,
Yeah.
you think about he's stoned in Lystra, and he gets up and he goes right back into the city.
Yeah.
What we take from that, I'm not sure, but he was relentless. We
Yeah.
should strive to be.
Yeah, I probably would take a couple days off after that. He was. Well, and like you said, even with his elevator speech, though, it's like he had a message, but he was so good at connecting, all things to all men kind of a thing, like even to those Greeks. I mean, he knew exactly what to say. He knew their society well enough, and he knew their talking points, and I think that's important for us. We study other religions and things. I think that kind of helps sometimes too, but he was just willing to relate. Whoever was in the room with him, Paul was going to address. It didn't matter who it was, and he was pretty effective at it, either making them mad or helping to convert them. But he was good at getting his point across. What else?
He demanded people discipleship look just like his. Let us go and say, with a quiet mind, work with your hands.
Yeah.
Within that spirit, you can still do what Paul did, but in your own way.
Yeah.
So there was a mercy in that from him.
Yeah.
He didn't say you get in the boat, go out there and get rocks on that all the time.
Yep.
If it need be, then so be it, but he saw that there was a way to follow Christ, and it down to living a quiet life.
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, and even like in some of his teaching, he's like, you should stay single if you can, but you don't have to. It's like, this is best from Paul's perspective, but you don't have to. So he didn't demand that from others.
You say it's better than American than
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point.
Interpret that,
I know how to interpret that. And if you don't, good luck to you. Was Paul a loner?
I just was thinking about that, because I was wondering.
You've been studying Paul, haven't you?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I was wondering, do you have any experience with
Well, and I think that's my point, is Paul he seemed like he was always with somebody, right? I mean, it's like Jesus, except for those moments he had to get away just to pray or something. I mean, Paul he was with someone, and I love the fact, too, that he's a mentor. He's not just like, he's got his fellows that he's bringing along with him. Kind of, I mean, probably the way Barnabas did at first with Paul. But he was always part of a team. It seems like. It was always like Paul and somebody when he's mentioned.
He's always been out too.
Yeah, 2 by 2, yeah. Just like the dads going up and down.
And he did at one point in time say that everybody deserted him except for the Lord. He was, specific on, hey, I was alone.
Yeah. But even, you think about too, it's like, even in prison though, it's like he'd have people that would come and support him, and people would come and take care of him.
And I said it as a supporting evidence of him having people around him.
Oh, yeah.
That he finished he was alone.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You
Who was
feel like-
Sal? Who was Sal?
We'll get Tim in one of our other classes.
I'm sorry.
Let's go, we got enough with Paul tonight. Go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say, it's not just that he takes people along with him or likes to be around people, but he always you can tell he keeps those relationships
Yeah.
because he's always greeting people on campus with
Yeah.
specific things.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a good point. Yeah, Greg?
To that point, he really appreciated the work that women were doing in the church.
Yeah.
I mean, out of all the writers in the New Testament, he's prolific in just talking about women doing wonderful things and helping them.
Yeah, in Romans 16.
Oh, yeah. Gives a nice little list there. Yeah, that's a great point. I like that you pointed that out.
And his traveling companion Luke was the same way.
Yeah. Yep. One, too, another one that I also like is just the fact that Paul loved the church. Because I think we can get down on the church a lot of times, like the church fails, is that Paul loved the church. And we read that especially because you think about just those sleepless nights. Why did he have sleepless nights a lot of times? He was praying. He was worried about. It's not like, I mean, he probably slept good. It sounded like he worked pretty hard and got beat a lot, but I mean, he really, he worried about the church. He loved the church. Because what is the church? It's the body of Christ. It's not like we have these people that keep failing me. That's the way we look at it. No, I'll say me. I keep saying we, like you guys are respecting me. That's the way I look at it a lot of times. It's like the church is made up of all these hypocrites and all these people that mess up. And Paul didn't look at the church like that. Paul saw this. This is the bride of Christ. We know that probably from some of his writings as well. But he like really loved the church in a way that I think a lot of us don't as much, because it's like we really get down on people. And Paul could have. Paul, again, deserted it many times too. And, you know, he had a lot of difficult situations, but Paul loved the church. And I think that's a great lesson for me, one that I need. He was humble. He was selfless. I think we see that in a number of his writings as well. Another one that I really like, too, is just Paul really believed in the power of prayer. Miss Jackie, you like that one, Pray Without Ceasing. He might have said something about that. That's one of Jackie's favorite lessons. That one. I still need to get a t-shirt. But he really believed in the power of prayer. Because, again, if he didn't, he wouldn't have prayed 3 times, right, for the thorn in the flesh. But he believed in the power of prayer, or the one behind the answering of the prayers, I guess, is a better way to say it. You know, Paul probably said some pretty nice prayers, but they didn't get his thorn removed. But he believed in the one that was the one answering the prayers, or not answering it the way that Paul wanted. And that's such a great lesson for me. Like I said, if you just want to look at, I know we talked about prayers and stuff. Most of them, a lot of them, it's just Paul's prayers. And you look at the way he structures his prayers, and kind of like we talked about with he loved the church, and, you know, to Rebecca's point, he mentions people. Like, it's always like, I am so thankful for you. That's kind of how he starts. Like, I am so thankful for you. You're doing great, do more. You know, he does those kind of things too. But it's just, I really appreciate just what the emphasis that he has on prayer. Because, again, that's one that I even struggle with sometimes, is just being able to pray like a Paul. What else? What are some other lessons you guys get from Paul? We'll give it, what about it? It's about time. Give me one or two more. We can go quick. William just left to get the kids. Rick?
He was sure of his reward.
Yeah.
And to the end, he never lost his faith, and he was confident at the very end that he was going to receive his praise.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, he was so confident in where he was going, or what the opportunities were. And I really love the conflict that he always seemed to have. Like, I'd love to stay here. I really want to go to heaven. Like, you guys need my help. Oh, I want to be with Jesus. Because he knew he was going there, right? I mean, he was confident that he was going.
He said he would rather be with Jesus than here on earth.
Absolutely.
Let Jesus play him here on earth.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a good one to end on then. So hopefully we'll still have that confidence like Paul, and learn from that. I love the study of Paul, one of these lesser known Bible characters. So I appreciate you guys' input this evening. Let's go ahead and pray, and then we can hang out like usual and talk for an hour. Bow with me. Father, what a blessing it is that we have your word. We have the writings of Paul, who is such a great example to us, one that we would see no value in. If we met him and understood who he was before your son met him on the road to Damascus. We're so thankful that you and that your son and that the Spirit are able to see beyond what most people are able to see, even in us, knowing that we don't deserve what you've offered, the mercy and the grace and that hope that Paul had and the hope that we have, to one day spend an eternity with you. So thank you for that, Father. There's not enough that we can say to really give you thanks for what you have offered to us, seeking us when we do not even seek you. We love you, and we pray all this in your Son's holy name. Amen. Yeah, and don't forget lessons. Luke's lessons. Luke's a lot stronger than me, so. Lessons right there on the
And
front.
there's also lessons for Sunday.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so we said John the Baptist is our last one. There's John the Baptist. I'll set that on the next chair. And then we start Thursday night, a week from tonight.